Hello, I'm Laurens van den Acker, Head of Design for Groupe Renault. I'm connecting with you from my home in Paris. I hope you're all safe, that your families are doing well, that you're staying inside, of course. All right, let's have a look at the questions. So, of course, along the way, I picked up a few languages. I speak Dutch, of course, and German, and French, and English, and Italian, and just enough Japanese to get me into trouble. But I would say that the most important language that I learned was the language of design, which is a universal language. And it's the language that you communicate without speaking. You communicate through your drawings, your ideas that you're able to put into paper. And if you do this very well, it doesn't matter what language you speak, you will find somebody that will give you a job and you will be able to make your dreams come true. Well, in terms of sources of inspiration, it really depends for which brand we are designing, because if you're designing for Renault, the values are different than a LADA or a Dacia or an Alpine. So Renault is obviously a pioneer. It's always had innovative, ingenious cars like the Renault 4, the Renault 5, the Renault 16, but also the Twingo, the Scenic, the Espace, even the Zoe. And so therefore, we always have to, for Renault, develop concepts that are very strong, very innovative. Renault is also a very human brand, human-centric. We are always close to people, and we accompany people in their journey of life. So we have cars for whether you are delivering goods, for whether you've just fallen in love, or for whether you've just starting a family. And we try to accompany our customers along this way. Now, if you switch to Alpine, this is a much more individual brand, which is all about driving acceleration, the pure joy of driving. Very lightweight. We need to respect the past with modern heritage. So we need to know everything about what happened in the past and project us into the future. So depending on the brand, it really depends what are our sources of inspiration. Now, if you ask me my personal sources of inspiration, I would cite two. First of all, my design team, because they're amazing. They come from everywhere. They're very passionate. And it's always, for me, a joy to see what they come up with and to pull really the potential out of them as much as I possibly can. And the second source of inspiration is traveling and seeing the world, absorbing new cultures, discovering, art and musea and architecture everywhere around the world. And this is, of course, one of the hardest things to do at the moment. So I can't wait for this confinement to be over. So growing up in Holland, there was not really a car design education as such. So I went to Delft University of Technology after high school and the Faculty of Industrial Design. And this was actually a very good education because it taught me the principles of design, the processes of design, how do you solve it, how do you attack a problem, how do you create proposals, and how do you come to a final result. They taught us about marketing, product planning, engineering, materials, etc. But it was not enough to get into a car company, which was my dream. For that, you also have to be able to sketch very well and to know how to express your ideas on paper, just with a pen and a paper. So there's only one way to learn this, and this is to do it yourself, to teach yourself. So I'd been sketching cars, in my notebooks from when I was very young. And then I got very serious about it, and I spent many, many hours looking at car magazines like Auto and Design, Car Styling, trying to copy the techniques of professional designers. And this ultimately was the other half of the education that I needed to become a car designer. But along the way, I've worked for many companies. I did my thesis project at Volvo Trucks in Belgium. And after my graduation, I went to Italy to work in Turin at Design Systems. This was a very small studio, but we had a fantastic project, for me at least, the interior of the Bugatti EB110. Then after 3 years, I went to Audi in Ingolstadt, and this was a true education for me. It was the first time for me to work in a real car company. So there was an amazing amount of talent, and I learned an enormous amount. Then after Audi, I followed my boss, Jay Mays, to California, where he had opened up a new studio with SHR, Perceptual Management. And after a few years, we all joined Ford Motor Company. First of all, in California, and there I was responsible for the brand imaging group, where we did a lot of concept cars. And I ended also spending 2 years in Detroit, Michigan, working on production vehicles. Then I was sent to Japan to become general manager of Mazda in Hiroshima. I stayed there nearly 4 years before joining in 2009 Renault and the Groupe Renault and Renault Design, where I've been ever since. But I think more importantly is what you learn along the way. And what you learn is you meet amazingly talented people. You have some great experiences if you move from country to country and from different, you see different cultures, you see the people where you're actually designing for. So if you're really passionate about design and it takes you all around the world and it makes you experience all these different cultures, you learn about your customers. That is really, really very useful day to day in my job. So if you have a chance to follow your passion and to see the world, do it. The launch color of a car is very important because it needs to draw your attention and it needs to grab you and seduce you. And very often, the first thing that you see when you see a car flashing by is its color. So we always try to link this launch color to a story that fits with the car. So in one example, in the case of the first Clio that I designed with the team when I joined Renault, the Clio 4, we chose a bright red color, rouge flamme. And we did this because we wanted to make people fall in love again with the Renault brand. And we wanted to tell this story of love and passion. And red seemed to be the best color to communicate this. And luckily, our customers, our clients agreed because we sold in the end 30% of all vehicles in this bright red. And that's why you see so many of these great red Clios driving around even today. Well, I come from a very creative family. I think my father was an architect, my brother is an architect, and I remember as a kid that whenever I visited him in his studio, which was the studio at our house, he would put a piece of paper and a pencil in my hands and said, "Start drawing something." So I started with drawing buildings and then quickly migrated to cars because they seemed much more dynamic and much more exciting to me. So I think that the first grain of creativity was given to me by my family. Well, it's impossible to pick just one car or concept if you have been designing for 30 years. So I'll just pick a few. In Ford, I would say the ones that I'm most proud of for different reasons were the Ford Bronco and the Ford 24/7 concept cars, one being extremely provocative, the other one really touching the heart and soul of the Ford brand. At Mazda, I would say it's the Nagara series of concept cars, really a fantastic series of really imaginative, aesthetically stunning vehicles. And at Renault, I can't, of course, not mention the first Marguerite with the Désir, the Clio 4, the Captur, even the new Clio and the new Captur, which are fantastic cars. The Trésor, which is a super vehicle that launched the second generation. The Morphos, which gives an indication into the future. So to be honest, there's too many cars to be proud of. And I'm happy that's the case, to be honest. Well, first of all, a good designer needs to have the skills. You need to be able to draw cars in any shape, way, or form possible. You need to completely be able to control your drawings and you control your designs. But that's not enough because you can be a very good piano player. It doesn't necessarily make you a very good composer. And a designer, in a sense, is a composer. So once you've had the skills, you also need to be able to create very inspiring visions of the future. How trends are moving, where is the society moving to, what are the problems of tomorrow that you want to solve, and what kind of solutions do you come up with to solve these issues. And you need to do this in a very aesthetically pleasing way without you maybe having the chance to explain it. So your drawings need to be able to talk for themselves. You need to be able to make people dream and give them a look into the future. Now, and then the third aspect, obviously, is on top of all this, a good designer is also a team player. A car is an incredibly complex product where you have to make trade-offs and deal with designers, engineers, marketeers, product planners, finance people, clients, commercial people. And if you can't have the capacity to work with others, to formulate a joint vision for any project, then you will have a very hard time. So those three things are extremely important for a good design. So when do we start designing the next Clio, the Clio 6? Well, I would like to say as late as possible, because we want to make sure that our cars are as fresh and as new as possible when they hit the market. If you start too early, you might have a good idea, but maybe the world changes in the meantime, and you might find yourself behind in terms of technologies or modernity. If you start too late, the car won't be ready in time, and you have to live with the previous generation for too long, and this might be very dangerous too. So we try to reduce our development time to the shortest time possible, so that whatever we design is as modern, as contemporary, as pushing as possible. Now, generally, this means that we are starting to design 3-4 years before a car hits the road, and then we have a very compressed program where we try to get everything done to make sure that you as a customer will get the best Clio ever. So whenever a new design director starts in a new company, obviously everyone expects him to open up a new chapter, and that's what we did. But you don't do this just like that. You also try to respect the past and keep the DNA that's in the brand and bring it into the future. So luckily, there was a lot of rich DNA in Renault. That first of all, thanks to the great design team and a great design culture. Second, Renault has always been known for very innovative cars, being a real pioneer in terms of different mobility solutions, with the Scenic, with the Twingo, with the Espace, etc. So we could really use this in the future and keep the spirit alive, the spirit of being ingenious, innovative, making mobility solutions for our daily lives, for everyone, being very human-centric. These are the values that we took into the future, and we gave it a new shape. Well, I'd like to say that there are no easy cars to design. I think any car that you design is hard work. But what makes it easier, I could say that, is if there is a clear vision for where the car needs to go to. What are you aiming for? What's the vision for this particular car? Who are the customers that you have in mind? And do you agree on this with all the different teams? Because if this is not the case, then a difficult project becomes exponentially more difficult, and you will lose time because you're not sure of where to go. So for me, the hardest projects are not linked to a Dacia, a LADA, an Alpine, or a Renault. They are linked to the fact, is there a clear vision of where you want to take this project to? So we talked before about the importance of brand identity, and one of the things that expresses brand identity at the moment very well is the lighting signature. And our designers in XLab came up with the idea of using a C shape that really anchors the car. And we loved it because it was very new, because the light actually goes out of the headlights, so it's out of the box in a way, literally. Then it makes the car look very wide, it anchors the car, and it gives it a certain nobility, a certain presence that you can see from very far on the street. So this is why we felt this could be easily applied on the whole lineup, and this is one of the reasons why you recognize Renaults in the street today. Well, electrification and EVs play a huge role in the automobile sector because it's one of the ways that allows us to dramatically reduce the amount of CO2 that we emit. So it's a key component of any future lineup. And luckily enough, Renault has been one of the first to start with this, I can say, revolution into electric mobility. And Renault was one of the pioneers of electric mobility with the arrival of the Zoe. And we didn't do this just for a small group of people, but we tried to democratize this new technology for the most. And this fits really good with the vision that we have for Groupe Renault to become a pioneer of sustainable mobility for all. So in that sense, electrification and EVs play a crucial role. Luckily enough, we have one of the widest lineups of EVs in the market. Renault is market leader in Europe in terms of EVs. We have anything from a Twingo EV all the way up to LCVs. So there's a lot of choice. It's very important. It makes sense. It's necessary to protect the planet. And Renault will be a big player in this. Well, the role of a concept car is to make people dream and to imagine a future that we want to go to. And I think it's very important for a big company to have dreams, because if you don't have dreams, you have no future. And for us as designers, we want to imagine this future in the most positive way possible without any of the constraints of today. Because if concept cars are maybe difficult to realize in today's context and today's technologies, that doesn't mean that this won't be possible 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. You know, if you look back at some of the American concept cars in the 50s and the 60s, they had televisions inside and stuff. At the time, this was absolutely impossible. But now we all live with screens in our cars that are connected, that you can watch movies on, etc. So if these cars weren't made at the time, we wouldn't have been able to live these dreams today. So even though I know it's frustrating, even for me as a designer, to make beautiful concept cars that I know are not feasible in today's context, we need them to imagine and to realize the future tomorrow.